Hello, and thank you for joining us here again at the Anarchist Experience. My name is Robert Kruger. I'm your host, and I have a friend of mine, Kyron Pearson. He decided to give me a visit while I was out in the New Mexico area, and stopped by, and so he's going to be my guest on the show. Also, we have Sam Wardman, who has joined us from the Ancom versus Ancap debate. He's going to be
Right.
talking from, I guess, the Ancom type perspective. I'm not sure, certainly not the Ancap perspective, but we're going to just talk about a lot of different things today. Thanks for joining us today, Sam.
Thanks. Great having a. Uh,
Well, I understand that you wanted to talk about the China um, imperialism, I guess, or the China.
I wouldn't say imperialism, but I guess the global imperialist structure would change in between the relations of the US and China, more so because now that China's foreseed the US in purchasing power, and also its economy in general has increased and now become one of the biggest economies today. And I'd say from previously seen from the US, it's always been built upon imperialization, the colonialism, the search for new markets, cheaper labor to basically stop the fallen rate of profit. And you see this usually from the investment of constant capital replacing variable capital, the decomposition of capital, usually through instead of investing in wages and human labor, that is often replaced with machinery and also more mechanized labor, which can also characterize with the fallen rate of value. Well, not the fallen rate of value, but also value drops, kind of like to the point as there's a correlation between the fallen rate of profit as well. So,
Okay.
but from seeing China, I'd say uh, places that China's already colonialized. For example, you see like Hong Kong is a classic example of a lot of ANCAPs kind of use an example of laissez-faire capitalism, and
Not exactly a very good example, if you ask
uh,
me, but
but has developed more so, I guess, urbanization and of course industrialization as well.
yeah.
In
Some of
some
the metrics that people use when they're evaluating whether a country is heavily regulated, a heavily government controlled, centrally planned type of economy, um, they don't include a lot of the things that I would include, which would be things like the drug war. Um, you know, the idea that you have a free market when it comes to, let's say, um, drugs, whether it be for entertainment purposes or for medicinal purposes, the incredible amount of regulation that goes into those industries um, really does restrict a lot of activity, and especially in the Far East, you'll find that they've got a history of knowing how to do some poppy fields pretty darn good. I'm not saying that you could really grow a lot of poppies in Hong Kong, but you know the the community there, they have to work around the restrictions that the government places
hmm,
on drugs, for example, and certainly on other types of activities that are very, I don't know, hedonistic.
hmm,
Um, but
hedonistic.
yeah, they're a fairly stodgy group of people as far as countries
Hmm,
go. They're certainly not as libertine as let's say France or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, well, all right. So one of the things that I think that we can both agree on is that when you have a country or a state
right,
architecture system, um, you're going to get handouts or dispensation where
hmm,
a legislative body, whether it be a king or a uh, parliament or whatever, they'll say, all right, well, this land is
right,
yours. And why? Because we just dictated.
hmm,
And it creates a kind of a dibs type of thing where, all right, well, I'm just going to go ahead and claim this land as mine, and I'm going to go ahead and use it and do whatever it is that I want to do with it. And that's fine, I suppose, in certain respects, that you're going to go off and create something and do something with the land. But a lot of times what they'll do is they'll use the land as a investment tool, where they will buy up other land in the area that, or they'll try to get government granted land in that area, and increase the value of those lands by making one particular section very profitable, as far as maybe they'll create resorts or some sort of draw for people to come, and because the land that's around it is also owned by them, they can increase the value of those properties as far as the demand for them, and then either lease them out or leasing them out, renting them out, things like that, where they are taking advantage of the fact that they got to say, dibs, this is mine, and if you're going to live there, if you're going to make a business there, well, you're just going to go ahead and pay as rent. And I would say that you're probably going to agree that that would be a really bad thing to have happen.
Yeah, I would agree. I've got not much to say, to be fair.
Well, when it comes to the capital that you see in a lot of countries, a very large portion of it, almost all of it, has been done that way. In a very significant sense. I mean, the United States land grab of where you were said, go out there and march across towards the west and keep going west, and take the land and make it what it is. It's going to be used.
Like cheaper labor and new markets.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, it was just also it's usually because they usually either look for cheaper labor and search for new markets to also expand.
Well, yeah, there is a factor of that happens. If you have a very valuable commodity that is easily found and prolific in a certain area, because there's just lots of it there. But it's also a very valuable commodity because it can do a lot for you in other things that you can sell. Yes, the capitalist is going to jump all over that, absolutely. So if you have an indigenous population of people, let's say in China, for example, that huge amounts of poverty that's going on there, lots and lots of people who are willing to work for wages that by our standards would be pathetic, but by their standards is a significant improvement in their life. Yes, the capitalist is going to jump on that all day long, and they would do that in Mexico, they would do that in other South American countries, in China, and other places in Asia, India, for example.
Right.
Well, and so yeah, that's definitely going to be something that's going to be.
I think you have to be very clear on which form of capitalism you're speaking of. Anybody who is sort of an anarcho-capitalist is going to seek out the market in which they're going to find the most profit, right? In which there's no coercion, no force, and allows them to do what it is that they want to do. I think we have to be very clear on what type of form of capitalism we speak of, because there's many forms. And I feel like
when we attack capitalism, we also talk about the current system within.
Right. And I think we have to distinguish what that current system exactly is, and I think that is corporatism, and it's a form of statism, exactly. And I think that as anarchists, we are diametrically opposed to statism, right? So when you bring up China, when you bring up India or the U.S., you're bringing up forms of statism. And we are.
But we have to kind of explain how the functionality works within the dynamic and where it is that the government plays a critical role in changing what capitalism does.
Right.
How does it poison that particular system? And when I said the word dibs,
the general argument would be more so that usually you would have two forms of capitalism. Capitalism 1, which would be the unregulated or either so fair a form of capitalism as people would rather so propose. But basically, markets are unregulated, and people freely trade within that current system. And more so,
let me correct that point. You said markets would not be regulated, and blah, blah. This is incorrect. Markets can be regulated without using the government. Okay.
I was just making a generalization, but also just get my point clear.
Please continue.
We'd say usually the communist perspective would more so say that in attack to right libertarians, and the general argument would go that capitalism won, as in freer market, has certain components that lead to capitalism too, and one of the components would be more so economic inequality, and more so we see a continual expansion of inequality within the freer markets, and more so until regulations are being put across until we then call crony capitalism, would more lead to that. The components would lead to that form of capitalism.
Okay, well, let's start with the idea that that capitalism creates inequality. Yes and no. It actually undoes inequality that exists in a certain way, but it also exacerbates inequality in a certain way. There's a variety of different factors that are involved with it. The fact is that if you have, let's say, for example, Michael Jordan, who's got physical capabilities that are far superior to others when it comes to the playing of basketball, there is inequality there that already exists. Now it is exacerbated, perhaps, by.
Are you talking about because of his physical capabilities, or are we?
Yes. Yes. He is physically superior, and has
the capabilities of playing basketball.
Yeah, in that particular one realm. He is.
No, you don't want to over-intellectualize inequality, because we lead into already two forms of inequality here that we're talking about, and it's more so turned into more so. Sorry if I say this kind of in an informal way, but more so a clusterfuck. And this is when, how I would say economic inequality would be the inequality that usually expands between the working class and the bourgeoisie.
Right.
And
well, I'm getting to that. But the point that I'm wanting to make is that there is inequality. It's just a different nature that occurs when you have people with specific physical attributes.
However, do not criticize that, so wouldn't see the much relevance in putting forth.
Well, let me get to the point on what it does. Okay, so would you agree that in capitalism that Michael Jordan being able to offer his services to a variety of different basketball teams can, because of his scarcity, raise his rate to what he wants to get paid in order to be on a team? He can jack up his prices and.
And more so, basketball players, or more so basketball games, are generally highly profitable.
Right.
If we're talking about the quality of the players and just more so the teams in general, if two of the most popular teams would more so be competing against each other, then of course that's going to be a very highly profitable.
Highly demanded venue. Right. Exactly. So when it comes to Michael Jordan's inequality, the capitalist system will actually exacerbate it. It will make it a greater differential because he will be able to convert his superior physical ability into a significantly superior economic situation.
Right.
Okay. However, it also allows people who have significantly inferior physical capabilities to use tools that they have, abilities that they have, specializations that they have, in order to offset those disabilities, those negative characteristics. For example, if you have a person who is incredibly inept when it comes to social interaction, they are unable to really gain friends and relationships and have people in their lives. socially awkward and all that kind of stuff. Well, they can compensate for that by becoming a very good, let's say, artist who produces artwork that is highly valued, and then they now have notoriety, and they are a person of wealth. Then this attracts certain people who are interested in being around wealthy people. This tells it offsets that. So it is an equalizer, and it is also a stratifier that creates a disparity. Now, the thing that's interesting about capitalism, though, is that it actually creates the ability for upward mobility or downward mobility.
Are you talking about anarcho-capitalism?
Anarcho-capitalism, yes. Upward mobility and downward mobility becomes a high number. It's a far easier thing to do to become a wealthy person in an anarcho-capitalist system than it would be to be in a statist system, or to be in a socialist or communist system as well. You certainly cannot become, exorbitantly wealthy in a communist system.
We're talking about two different modes of production, but
yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, let's just say if we had an anarcho-communist type of situation, and somebody works their ass off. I mean, works a lot.
puts a lot of time into production, and
It not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily.
it doesn't have to be that, but that's
It could be time.
put that into the example. But
Yeah, certainly time is a factor. The amount of time that somebody puts into a process and learning how to make it more efficient, to become more effective in their job, whatever it is, the activity that they're doing. It takes like 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. So if you spend that 10,000 hours in becoming an expert, let's say you're a brain surgeon, spending 10,000 hours to become a brain surgeon and become an expert in it, that person is able to move upward in his, economic status in a anarcho-capitalist system. But in the anarcho-communist position, I don't see how he actually is going to become, wealthy or of.
you're certain that if someone's working their ass off and not gaining the amount of wealth, and already pointed this out, it's two different modes of production.
Oh,
if
yes.
you're accumulating wealth under a capitalist system, then your incentives there were to be working hard in order to gain those incentives under that.
What kind of capitalist system are you talking about specifically?
I'm talking about any capitalist system because it's usually the capitalist mode of production is based on the accumulation of commodities for the capitalists, and also the worker accumulates wealth that is spending hours and work in production.
Well, I mean,
can I add something?
absolutely. Your name?
Oh, I'm Red and Black from last time.
Oh, Red and Black. Welcome.
Yeah, hi. So I don't know. I guess this is the discussion about like moving up in an economic system through work or whatever. So I guess what?
How do you increase your wealth?
Right. Okay. Well, if the question is, I think the right thing to do in that situation would be to compare how you do it in both economic systems, because then that's the only way we're going to reach any kind of conclusion about what one is.
Also, the increase of wealth can be more so if we're talking about two different modes of production here.
Oh, yeah.
I'm about to go into that. So, in an anarcho-communist society, the way wealth is distributed and the way things are organized is through a collective process of everybody having an equal say and consensus democracy, which means that decisions are come to through the full consent of everybody involved. And so, basically, in an anarcho-communist society, the way people gain their wealth is through working for a collective benefit, right? So, working to increase your own living standards and the living standards of those around you. And because the economy is based off of from each according to his ability to each according to his need, then people are basically what would be happening is that you would be trying to maximize the amount of happiness for everyone involved.
Okay.
In a capitalist society, you have what is called markets and private property.
What
so
kind of capitalist society are you talking about?
We're always talking.
I'm just talking about generally. Like, I understand, like, you would want to be concise with that.
Right.
I'm just talking about generally any capitalist society that you want to go to. The part of the prerequisite for capitalism generally is markets and private property. So in that kind of system, how you make profit, first of all in the market, is through exchange. So, I give you X, and then you give me X, and that's how things are distributed in the market society, right? And so the way you would profit in that situation is actually, instead of, I guess, from my perspective, instead of working for mutual benefit, instead of doing that, you're looking to increase the amount of value that you personally hold. It's something Marx talked about. He talked about it was called producing value for value's sake. So
I would have to disagree with that. The purpose of the capitalist is to find out what it is that the customer wants, or to create a interest in the customer that they want, to persuade them to want something, whatever it happens to be. And let's say, for example, if people want iPhones, then if you provide iPhones, then you are satisfying you are helping them achieve their desires and their goals simultaneously while achieving goals that you are setting for yourself.
But in the capitalist mode of social relations, people, you don't just get, you're not simply provided with free access to those things. Instead of that, you are saying, all right, well, then you have to give me something in order for me to contribute this value to you. So that's kind of where the value for value's sake comes in. It's, instead of working for collective benefit, right, you're working to increase your own personal value. And and that's like, it's not like, I'm not saying that. Let me finish.
Okay.
I'm not saying that people in a market system are saying, fuck everybody else, I'm gonna only get my own. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, the basic system is working to increase your own value as much as possible, because it's based on
accumulation of.
So that's kind of the process of value for value's sake, and then we can go on to private property, which how capitalists make money in a private property system, or at least
that's a different concept, I think, than what we're.
Well, I mean, I don't think it is. I mean, we're talking about how you make, you profit in
let's address the one topic first, and then we can go into that one as well.
I mean, but it's actually pretty relevant to the discussion, right? So,
it is definitely relevant. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to have us work out the.
Well, I mean, what I'm trying to do is compare the kind of attributes of both systems. So, I'm going because that's part of how. That's just kind of, it's integrated into the whole argument.
Yeah, it's part of the methodology as to how things work. Got it. Yeah.
Right.
I completely get where you're coming from. So the question then comes up: if, let's say, that my work is done to in an anarcho-capitalist system, basically, if I go through spending 10,000 hours in learning how to become a brain surgeon, and then I'm providing those services to be a brain surgeon in order to benefit those people who need brain surgery, but also in order to benefit myself by receiving compensation for having done all the work that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I rationally do this is so that I myself will benefit, yes, but also so that my children will benefit, so that my family will benefit, and so that I can achieve those things that I desire in whatever it may be, whether it be trying to fund a project that I'm most interested in, let's say whether it is researching cancer research or something like that. I don't know what it is that my particular goals would happen to in this person's example, but they're seeking to try to fulfill what it is that they think is of value. And some of those things that they might think of value are my societal, everyone is happy, better off, and I'm trying to benefit my community, through a feeling of solidarity. Okay, so.
Well, I mean, the problem that I'm seeing with that, though, is that the market system in itself, just by its foundational ethic, fractures solidarity. Because what you have, instead of, again, working for mutual benefit, is doing economic distribution in forms of exchange. So, I'm not going to give you this unless you give me this. right? So in the capitalist mode of distribution, people don't get access to the healthcare unless they pay the doctor, and the doctor doesn't get access to providing, for himself and his family unless he can cough up whatever the people that are providing that service want, right? In a communist mode of distribution, instead of that, you actually have everybody working for mutual benefit to make everybody happy, instead of just kind of these individualized, atomized exchanges where we try to maximize our own value as much as possible.
Okay, so when it comes to the communist type of, let's all work for mutual benefit and everything is going on, does that not create an incentive for the person to basically become a leech?
I don't think so. And because
what consequences do they have?
Right. So I'll go into that briefly. That kind of comes from this kind of understanding of how humans behave. That's kind of like people tend to make this mistake a lot, and it's actually something that's kind of pushed by establishment economics and academics and things like that. The idea of human nature, that there's some kind of set way that people are going to act, people are going to think, and thus so communism.
I'm not coming from that perspective. All I'm saying is that are there some people who would, as they have the ability, if they have the ability to become loafers and leeches, there are some people who would do that. Is that not correct?
I think that, again, you have to put that in the context. All right, you have to put that in the context of the relevant sociology. I mean, the relevant sociology, if you ask that question with that in consideration, what the sociology says is that there's no kind of set way that people so. For instance, the advent of leeches in the society, that's actually coming from that. That actually springs from a society where the social kind of dynamic, how you get ahead in the social system, is via gaining as much for yourself as possible. So obviously there are going to be people who, all right, I'm just going to leech off of everybody else, because that's the foundational ethic of the system. That's how you get ahead. I guess if you're looking at the context in a communist society, conversely, I don't think there's the same foundation. There's not the same foundational ethic which leads to those kinds of things. So instead of
what are the?
Let me finish, and then you'll have the whole.
Okay, go for it. Yeah.
Broad idea what I'm talking about.
I'll get a minute as well, but.
So what I'm talking about is basically that in a communist society, the foundational ethic, how you get ahead in the system, is by working for mutual benefit. So thus the foundational ethic of kind of getting as much for yourself as possible, that leads to people leeching off of other people, is not there. So I don't think there's going to be the same. I don't think you can even try to make the case that there's going to be the same type of people.
What is the repercussion for when that happens, though?
What did you say?
What is the repercussion for if and when that does happen?
Okay. Well, that certainly can be gone into. So, in many anarchists in that kind of anarchist communists in that kind of question, they have theorized what's called social sanctions, right? So if someone decides to slack off, or if someone starts to become a gradation on the community, starts doing things like running around and hurting people and just being a dick, or actually being dangerous.
No, don't make a straw man out of this. Okay,
right.
All we're talking about is a guy that basically he goes over and he gets the food.
Well, that's what I'm leading into. So things like that, things like being a leech, things like being a dick, that stuff is actually that there's actually a punishment system within the system of communist anarchism. It's called social sanctions. And what that would mean is, since everybody's interconnected and there's no kind of monopolies on controls of wealth and stuff, and everybody has an equal say in how the wealth distribution is managed. So because of that, people can say, okay, well, you know what, you're not really working for our benefit as well, where you're just kind of succubussing off us. So you know what, we're gonna put a social sanction on you and say, all right, we're not going to provide for you as much as we were unless you start, pulling your weight as well. So, say, for example, that someone, maybe someone was being a bit lazy, and so we said, all right, well, you're not going to get X luxury for X amount of time until you stop being so lazy or whatever. So that's kind of how that would work.
Okay, so this this is coming down to, let's say, I mean, the person, they have their whatever it is. Let's say that they like to paint, or not even paint. They like to do charcoal drawings,
Right.
on concrete walls, and on the, they like to just do stuff that's just, I don't know, goofing off, playing whatever, and they're off in their own little world or whatever, and all they really need is food, and they can get charcoal out of any ash that's out there. So it's not like you're going to be able to deprive them of the tools that they're using to enjoy themselves. Okay, maybe they're just making up fantasy stories and talking to themselves, whatever it may be. The point that we're trying to make is that if there's a person who is like that, and they continue to refuse, and they're they have the capability of thinking. They're not crazy. The response that you have in your community is what you're suggesting is, from our perspective, an example of the same thing that people accuse anarcho-capitalists of doing, which is called structural violence.
So I don't understand. I mean, structural violence, it's a principle about coercion, right?
Right.
So,
The initiation of coercion.
Yeah, right. The initiation of coercion, right? So, from that perspective, I don't really see how you could call that structural violence, because if we're saying, all right, well, you're started so the guy is being lazy. Let's put that into context. All right, so if someone's being lazy, I don't see how that can't be quantified as structural violence. So
the structural
violence being taken on the part of the community. I mean, the way communists have outlined structural violence. The structural violence being taken on the part of the community is in response to the structural violence that the person is committing by being lazy and being a leech.
No. See, as far as I understand it, the complaint of structural violence against anarcho-capitalists is that if you don't work for a capitalist, you'll starve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
the reason why that argument is usually displayed is because the capitalist usually controls within his wages.
That's I mean, maybe you get that in
without
something
without wages, you cannot really acquire the basic necessities in life.
Yeah.
Unless you
we're not going to deny that.
The argument, it's a bit more nuanced than that. I mean, that's something you would see on an anarchist memes photo or something. The actual argument is more from a standpoint of who controls the wealth and property, and that's how structural violence happens. That's why if I do not work for a capitalist, I will die. So there's systematic analysis going on.
It's what is it called when a question actually includes its own answer?
It's begging the question.
Begging the question. That's begging the question. You're saying, well, anarcho-capitalism is structural violence because it's anarcho-capitalism.
I mean, really, the collective, in your perspective, is essentially the individual that you would call the anarcho-capitalist, right?
And that follows.
The collective is acting as if it were an individual and making decisions about what to do with this rogue individual within the context of the collective, right?
Well, I mean, but it's hardly
comparable. The collective owns everything, right?
I mean, but it's what I'm saying is that you can't really.
The collective owns certain properties.
Right. So the collective owns everything, right?
Let's just give Sam a chance to talk here. Sam, if you would, please.
Okay.
This would be based more on property-based production, not like a house or anything like that. If something you personally own, such as your house, your personal land, your own car, your own motor vehicle, or your toothbrush or your clothes, they're not going to be collectively owned. These are two distinct things here.
I think
you're talking about property-based production, which instruments of production that require these set of instruments in order for labor to be more so made, or would be more so collectively owned.
If a person has their own, I don't know, garden, that's a means of production. So in that particular example,
if that's the house there.
I mean, I think it would be better if we didn't get into that discussion, because what I was just gonna say, when I believe your name is Kieran. Am I pronouncing that right?
Kyron like Byron.
Oh, Kyron. Okay. Well, okay. So what Kyron was saying was that, so the thing that the anarcho-communists are like not realizing, I guess, in this scenario is that the collective is acting as the capitalist is in the situation that they would oppose. Is that your argument? Like, as I understand it correctly?
Yeah,
Basically, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So, but like, I don't see how.
Hold on. Let me clarify that.
All right.
The collective is acting not as the anarcho-capitalist is, but as sort of the the statist capitalist would act as.
I don't.
Right, so
if you're collectively owning, like,
hold on.
surplus,
Hold on. I need to. So can you like?
From the perspective of an Ancom, right?
Well, I mean, can you take me down that road though? Because I don't really see how that's.
All right, so let's go down through it. All right, in the state capitalist, the statist capitalist system, you have the capitalists, and you get, let's say, you got 20 of them who own all the means of production in a region. Okay, if the person does not do what the capitalist wants, they don't get a job, and they don't get paid, and they can't eat. Right? In the anarcho-communist position, as far as we're understanding it, what you're saying is that if the consensus is that you're not contributing to the community, you're not doing.
I can already see this being a
you're not doing what we're telling you to do. Therefore, you don't eat.
No.
So like, but
this
like,
this no.
The thing with that though is like, so like what's being put forth by the Ancom and the argument against the capitalist, that is not that people are not being allowed to just freely do whatever the fuck, like that's not the argument. The argument is capitalist social relations don't maximize autonomy. That's the argument, right? And so the reason why we say, okay, well, if someone is being lazy, then we should try to put social sanctions on them to make them not be lazy, is because people being lazy, just like the capitalist owning large swaths of wealth and property, is not behavior that maximizes autonomy. So we're going for the maximization of autonomy, not the complete free-for-all, everyone do whatever the fuck they want.
Wait, how do you maximize autonomy in a collective?
Okay, well, we can go down that road. So maximization of autonomy requires collective action, right? So if we don't...
Wait, no. You're talking about autonomy, and then you're saying collective. You don't see the hypocrisy, the cognitive dissonance?
I don't see the hypocrisy at all.
In autonomy?
I don't see the hypocrisy at all.
Autonomy is also, if everyone's having an equal amount of autonomy within each other, also the equal saying within that collective. The reason why he's saying autonomy is maximized by collective action is more so because the people within that collective, the individuals within that collective, have an equal say within that.
Okay,
like if we can go down like the road of that.
All right. Well, let me just.
I don't understand many anarcho-capitalist conceptions of the word collective, because collective refers to simply a group of people. It doesn't refer to some tyrannical entity, that gets to lord over you or something.
I get what you're saying, and it's. I guess the word is kind of tainted for the perspective that we're coming from, and that's fine. We can just basically say, group. Or whatever. I mean, it's just it's the term is kind of tainted. But let's just take an example that I think can show that the individual autonomy is restricted in what it is that you're suggesting. All right. So I am an individual, and I seek to create a sculpture. The sculpture is a offensive nature to the majority of the community. In fact, an extraordinarily large amount of the community. Now, in order to make this sculpture, I have to have access to the means of production, whether it be chisels or whatever. And I also have to have access to the marble that I'm going to carve it out of. Okay? So I go to the marble, I don't know, pitching conference where I pitch my idea for how we're going to use this marble. and I say, I want to make a marble statue of some really nasty stuff that people don't like, because I want.
Okay.
Okay, and the collective will say, no, that's not going to be something that we're gonna give you the ability to do.
I don't see why that would be.
The individual autonomy has been suppressed there, has it not?
I mean, I don't like, but like you're making a jump that can't really be connected. What we're saying is that people can't, like, what's being said by the anarcho-communists is not that people shouldn't be able to do what they want on their own leisurely time, and that they should be always bound to the will of the collective. What we're saying is that there should be collective involvement in the welfare of all people, and we should be trying to collectively maximize everyone's autonomy. So that would mean trying to find a way where that person can fritter away their time doing kind of pottery that nobody likes, but also that no one else's freedom is infringed upon by doing that. So, like, you're kind of making a leap here that isn't connectable.
Okay. All right. I'm wanting to make a statue. Okay, the statue has got sexual whatever that is considered to be offensive in this particular community. You know, you could make it as offensive as you possibly want in your own mind. Maybe it's just a bare-breasted woman, and we live in a community that is sexually repressed. Whatever it happens to be. All right. I want to make this. Now, in an anarcho-capitalist society, I own the land that I'm on. I own the fruits of my labor, and if I decide that I'm going to do an exchange with somebody for some marble and for some chisels, I can do so, and then I can make my sculpture, no problem. Now, if there are people who are around this community, who are neighbors to this person, and they see the sculpture on his lawn and they find, wow, this is really offensive, then they can put up on their own property dividers or visual impediments to prevent the sculpture from being exposed to them, offending their sensibilities. But in an anarcho-communist society, as far as I understand it, the personal property is his, that's fine. But since the means of production and the resources are communal, he has to go to the community and make his petition for the fund, for the stuff that he's going to work with, whether it be marble or whatever. And so he proposes these things. The community says no, and therefore individual autonomy is suppressed.
Okay. Well, all right. So there's a few problems with that, actually. Number one, first of all, this is kind of nitpicking, I guess, but like the idea of sexual repression is kind of, it's not accepted by anarcho-communists. We reject that just on principle.
Okay.
But,
you can make a
that's one problem with that. The other problem with that is, like, you have to put it into context, though.
Okay.
So, for instance,
I'll give you
I wouldn't do that.
Like, Jake.
Okay. Let's just assume that it's actual pedophilia, like gross.
Okay. Okay. Fine. All right. So, what I'm like, the problem that I'm finding with that is you're kind of like, you're not accounting for the actual, like, the communist definition of what would count as an infringement upon freedom. Because I don't really see that as an infringement upon individual freedom. Because what I view at, like, if you're talking about in terms of land, land is a collective. Like, people collectively use the land in their communities. Okay. So, like, I don't see it as a limitation on freedom for everyone to have a say in what's put on that land.
Right. So what about your house? Like, is it your house, or does the collective?
Your personal use. That's your personal use.
I mean, that's
really done. It's whether your choice or not.
But that depends. I mean, it all depends on how the given thing is used.
How much land do you get as an individual?
Okay, so, like, the conception of property in that respect, or the conception of possession, or whatever.
Who decides how much land is an inappropriate amount?
Yeah, I'm about to give you the metric for that.
Okay,
What I'm saying is that it depends on how that is used. Okay, so from the anarcho-communist perspective, if something is used by a group of people, then it's kind of immoral from our standpoint for people to. For one person in that group to monopolize control over the thing that's used by all the other people.
Okay, so like a bed is not, it's something that everyone could use.
They could use it, but if it's not used by everyone, then there's no point in even engaging in that.
But like, if you built a bed in your house,
I don't know. I think I already answered that one.
All right, go ahead.
All right, so the idea that if I have made, I don't know, a swing set. I built a swing set with trees that were on my property that I, because this is where I live. I planted a tree inside my house, okay, and I grew the tree inside my house, and then I cut down the tree, and then I turned it into a swing set, okay, and everybody might want to use my swing set, but I'm saying it's my swing set. It's out on my front lawn. Front lawns are allowable or not, I don't know. Let's assume that they're acceptable, that you can have a front lawn.
Yeah, you can have a front lawn. You can have a front lawn.
How big can your front lawn be?
Oh yeah, but let's continue. Okay, so I set up this.
That's the point of the discussion.
So I set up the swing. I got it on my front lawn, and my kid has some friends. Right? And so the friends come by, and they're swinging on the swing set. Right? And one of the kids jumps off or whatever and lands in my garden. Okay. This bothers me. I say, you know what? No other kids are using my swing set. This is now me restricting access that everyone was using.
Yeah, so you're saying, like, just to get the example straight, that you're saying that, okay, so what if someone builds a swing set themselves and has some other people use it, maybe their kids or whatever, but they still own it?
But they what?
But they still own it. Is that the...
Well, they own it for the time, that they didn't let other people use it, but then they invited some guests to visit. They used the swing set, they had, their kid invited guests or whatever, and they were fine with that. But then something happened where they decided, you know what, I don't like this anymore. I don't want other people using it anymore because it's causing a dangerous situation for my plants in my garden or whatever. And so they say, no, this is my swing set. Nobody's allowed on it except for my kids and my family.
Okay. Well, the problem that runs into. So you're talking about the Ancom principle, or the just principle in general, that people bring up in discussions with Ancaps of structural violence that a lot of Ancoms accept. So, like, the thing that you run into with that is it or is it not structural violence for someone? So, say people are using a swing set, right? Let me finish.
Right, but we went to a different topic, so we're not talking. This is an example. I'm leading into how this is gonna work.
Okay,
fine, but we're not claiming that that's structural violence.
I know you're not. I'm showing how that makes that example not not a valid objection. That's what. That good?
Oh yeah, go for it. Keep going.
All right. So we're talking about the principle of structural violence and the fact that we believe that people should be able to have an equal say in how what they use is run. Okay. So if the use of the swing set is infringing upon my right to dictate how the garden that I use is run, then I don't see how that would be acceptable by an Ancom principle to let that keep going. Like, so to use your example, working within the context of your example, right. You're saying, okay, well, what if the swing set is, hurting my garden? Well, I'm using my garden, so that means that I would, even by the Ancom principle, that I should be able to dictate what happens with what I use. Even by that example, we shouldn't let this using of the swing hurt my garden because that interferes with my right to use.
I got you. I understand what you're saying.
What happens on my garden to what I see fit, which is what the Ancoms advocate. So, that's the problem that I see with that example.
Okay, so instead of my garden, I don't know, the noise that the kids are making when I'm in my home, I don't like it. There's too much chatter going on out there, so I don't want to hear it anymore. Whatever, I don't know. Whatever the reason is that I want, let's say that I decide that I would like to use the wood that's the lumber for the swing set. I would like to use it for something else instead. I make this decision. Now I have to get some sort of consensus approval in order to take down the swing set that I made with my own labor. It doesn't make sense to me.
I don't see that doesn't make sense. Because, so what you're saying is, oh no, it's so immoral that I should have to get the consensus approval of everybody who uses a given thing. Like, so, to take your example, you're saying that it would be completely immoral. So let's say, for example, that I live in a house with a bunch of tenants, right? Like, or I live in a house with a bunch of roommates. That's a word. Right. That's a word, not tenants, roommates. So roommates, right? Yeah. We all have to use this house. I mean, we all do use this house.
Right.
Live in this house. You're saying, oh no, I don't get to monopolize control over the house that other people are using. Boo-hoo for me. Like.
Okay, but that's missing a critical element. I built the house.
Mm-hmm.
My house.
Mm-hmm.
I'm letting other people stay there because I'm a generous guy, or because, I don't know, just let's say I'm a generous guy, whatever. Whatever the reason is, I let people stay in my house with me. Okay, but it's still my house. And just because other people happen to be living there doesn't mean that they have it it's eternal right to continue to live there. I can revoke my permission to let them live there at any time.
But that's just a bunch of unbacked, like so basically like what you're saying is, all right, well it's my house, so my rules go. But in order for something to be like so who has a claim over a given thing is an ethical claim, and ethical claims require ethical proof.
Okay,
so you're gonna have to show to me why it's my house and the other people that live in it shouldn't have any other say whatsoever.
Because you built it, right, with your own hands, or you exchange your own labor.
So,
okay, I mean that's great, but I I could build a lot.
You don't own your labor? Is that what you're saying? You don't own the things that you do with your body?
Okay, so this is going under the impression though that
no. If I go out and I do a performance, right? If I sing, right,
yeah.
Do I not own that singing?
Not really.
I don't think that's a good example.
You're only taking into account the problem with this analysis that I'm seeing is you're only taking into account the individual labor that has gone into that, not the labor that has gone into it from like every other person that has been involved in that. So for example, take the singing example and the house example. The singing example, to be able to sing, you had to be able to get the skills for singing from other people.
No, not necessarily. You can develop them on your own, right?
No, you can't. If you had no parents to raise you, if you had no kind of instruction on how to sing properly, if you weren't taught basic language skills, you wouldn't be able to sing. Like the whole kind of process of human development is a collective effort.
That's the same thing.
You can't look at human development and try to individualize it. It's a collective thing.
Okay, all right.
Have you ever heard for example though, have you ever heard the saying it takes a village to raise one kid or something like that? It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
All right.
Development of any human being's development and the acquisition of any human being's wealth is a collective effort.
Okay, so when it's not a collective effort, then that's yours.
What?
When it's not a collective effort, then it's yours. So I
can't really think of many things that aren't a collective effort because any human development is a collective effort.
Right. Okay. So I'm fine. Let's go ahead and go along with that principle. If that's the case, then you have no right to personal property.
I don't see why that follows.
Well, why would you have the ability to exclude others who are absolutely integral to your creation of your home
or your shirt, for that matter?
But that's where the principle of equal wealth distribution comes in. So, right. Okay. So the idea that one person cannot monopolize huge amounts of wealth for themselves, but that every individual person has to be involved in the distribution process of wealth. That's where the communist principle comes in. So that's not exactly.
So let's say we all got together, we allocated this, and we all said, all right, everything has been allocated, everything is hunky-dory, we all have our, 6.5 acres.
Right.
Okay. There's your 6.5 acres. There's my 6.5 acres. This is my land. This is my property. This is all agreed upon. Everything's good. Fine. If that were proposed in your anarcho-communist society, and everybody did that. And everybody got their 6 square acres of land. Okay. After that, anything that they produce on that land, is it theirs or is it now communal?
I don't like. So I mean, like, so the distribution of wealth, right? As I just said, is
Right,
supposed to be a collective process, right?
Okay.
It's something everybody has a say in. So any given thing that's distributed or made in society and that has to be distributed is going to be a collective process. I don't care what it is.
Okay.
So the collective is in. Will there be multiple collectives? How will those collectives interact?
No, it's
That's actually a very interesting point, because anarchists have gone through that. So, for instance, the anarchist principle when it comes to that is where you have federations, right, built on horizontal networks of free association. So basically, the idea
Federations.
let him finish. Please continue.
Okay. Excuse me. So basically, the idea of a federation within anarchist principles is that people get together, and so in the kind of interactions with other communities, they have delegates, and they say, okay, so you're going to go to that community, like, and delegate the information that we are trying to give to them, and then we're going to network the whole discussion and the whole process throughout that process, and it's going to be on a level to which every individual person can have the biggest say possible. And so basically that's the principle. So that's how that works. And that's how the different networks of different communities would interact.
Well, I don't want to go off on that tangent if you don't mind. I'd like to go back to the.
Well, I mean, that was part of, like, he asked me, like, okay.
Yeah, I know. I know he asked you. So I
going to operate together.
Best to give you the opportunity.
That's how they would operate.
Yeah, I want you to be able to answer the questions that are posed, but I'd like to bring us back to the personal property thing. All right, so we've got this personal property thing. I've got my 6.5 square acres.
Mm-hmm.
I use my 6.5 square acres to produce something. Mm-hmm. Let's say it's wheat. So I produced wheat. Mm-hmm. Is the wheat mine?
Depends anyone else.
Wait, can you say that again? I didn't hear.
Yeah, everybody's been given a 6.5 acre square plot by the distribution through the Ancom system. Mm-hmm. All right. So I use my 6.5 acres to produce wheat.
Mm-hmm.
Do I own the wheat?
Do you own the wheat? Well, again, I don't think that in a distribution system where everybody is equally involved, I don't think you can say, all right, well, I'm going to monopolize, this commodity for myself.
I didn't say monopoly.
Like, there's gonna be boundaries. So like there's gonna be boundaries set up that can be realistic, but those boundaries are gonna be determined by the collective of people.
Right, and the boundaries were determined to be 6.5 square acres. That's your land. That's my land.
A minute.
Okay.
In a minute.
All right. All right. So everybody.
All right. In a minute. Fucking kids. All
right. So you've got your 6.5 square acres. I've got my 6.5 square acres. Kyron's got his 6.5 square acres. Sam's got his 6.5 square acres. Okay, everybody's got 6.5 square acres. Sam's making apples. Kyron's making bricks with Adobe bricks. Okay, I'm making.
Producing hammer. No, could we say I'm producing apples by the use of a hammer and a sickle?
Well, no. I mean, you planted some trees. And you harvest apples.
Oh, no, I'm joking.
Right.
Terrible joke.
So you plant your trees. You got some apples growing there. Great. It's going on. You got your apples going. That's great. Mm-hmm. All right. I've planted wheat. Okay. So the wheat has come to be at the point where I can harvest it. So I go out there and I take out my sickle and I do my thing and I take the wheat and I take it over to my silo or whatever the hell it is on my 6.5 square acres. Mm-hmm. Is that wheat mine?
I mean, no. I mean, I don't think you should get to monopolize the control over commodities. I was just going on about.
Wait.
I went on that whole spiel before about the collective.
Hold on. Stop. Hold on. You said monopolize. That's not acceptable to me. Okay. There are 500,000 other people that are in the neighborhood who happen to make wheat too. So there's no monopoly. Okay? So don't make a straw man.
Well, there definitely is a monopoly. I mean, you're like so that particular wheat that you produced, you have the monopoly of control over it. In your example.
This wheat I've got a monopoly over if I claim that it's mine. So don't I also have a monopoly over the 6.5 square acres when they're distributed?
What'd you say?
Do I not also then instead have a monopoly over the 6.5 square acres when it's determined that that's how much everybody's going to get?
I mean, again, I don't see what the need is to go through all these different examples, because I think it was just babbling on about for like 5 minutes. That the distribution of wealth is a collectively determined process.
I understand.
What's going to go to who? What's going to go to who? And what's going to go to who and how it's going to be used is a collectively determined process, because that's something that affects everyone.
Okay, so what I'm basically getting you to agree to then is that when new things are made, whether it be wheat, apples, whatever, you don't own it. It's still a collective thing now that's determined on how to allocate it.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer is no.
You don't own your
labor. You own the land.
You don't own your labor.
You don't own the fruits of your labor.
Right. Exactly.
Because you're creating a new wealth that didn't exist before.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
What do you mean you don't own the fruits of your labor? I find that to be a dubious claim.
Okay, if I made wheat on land that I've been given as a...
Yeah, but that's the problem with that. The problem with that, though, is that's a completely truncated frame of reference when we're talking about the fruits of our labor, right? So, like I was just going on about before with that he asked me about the singing and stuff. Well, I said that was a collectively done process, because all human development and all human acquisition of wealth is a collective process. So if that's the case, I don't have the ownership of my labor for one person who was involved in that process, the one person, not everyone who was involved in that process, but one person to monopolize the control over certain commodities that are produced.
I mean, you are the commodity. You are the ability to sing in the way that you sing. Right?
Yes. Can you drop the singing, please?
All right, so we'll drop the singing. We talk about wheat, right? The collective, as you would put it, developed the wheat particular strain that you grow, right? And they gave you the techniques and taught you how to grow the wheat over millennia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you not still own the wheat that you grew on your land?
But again, that's the truncated frame of reference that I was talking about.
How is that truncated?
It's truncated because how people so the skill set that you have to be able to grow that wheat, you got to get that from somewhere.
Right.
And the skills that you had to be able to even learn that, you got to get that. That comes from how the people in your community have brought you up.
Right, I got it.
That's a completely.
We're saying the same thing.
Right, you can learn that.
Could you imagine? Let me ask you something. Could you imagine?
Fish.
Could you imagine?
Until you go out and fish and actually produce with those skills that you've learned, then that is yours. Like, you use those skills.
But that was a process. You got those skills.
And you may have paid for those skills.
You got those skills. Hold on. You got those skills.
For those skills in order to learn how to fish.
Let me finish.
You may have learned how to fish from a fisherman, but you may have caught him fish and given it to him in order to learn those things, right?
But the fisherman got taught by other people.
Right, exactly. He got taught by other people that did the same thing, right?
Yeah, so that's the labor that goes into that is done by multiple people. How can we say...
You paid your dues.
Okay, one at a time.
You paid what it is that they asked for in order to teach you those things, and now you are on your own using those skills that you've acquired through exchange to produce for yourself. Now, are those things your things?
And he's saying no.
I don't think so, because the labor that has gone into those things, okay, that was other people.
So everything.
Let me illustrate something for you.
You said no.
Could you imagine where you would be if you did not have the work of other people, the people in, say, where U.S. labor is exported to, like, say, China or Bangladesh? Look on the tag of your clothes, okay? That's going to say, that's not going to be something that you made, like, yesterday with your, cotton gin or some shit. People in China made that crap, all right? So that was something that was made by other people. Every single thing in your life has required the collective labor of other people.
You
can't say, oh, well, I'm just going to, I made this myself because I was the one who put it together. No, you
Right.
acquired those skills and those tools from the labor of the whole society.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Oh.
wait. We got it. We got what you're saying. What you're coming from. All right. So you've got your society. You've got, they're teaching you all this stuff, and you're a product of the society. It takes a village.
Mind you, can I also point out that whenever I hear that question, do you own the fruits of your labor, yes or no, whether that's got to be said in a yes or no manner, that is technically a loaded question.
Is it? Okay. How is it?
Because usually, direct, more so to serve the question's agenda by saying that if he doesn't, then more so this is a this and that and this and that, and then.
Oh yeah, we don't want to necessarily say that if you own the fruits of your labor, that automatically ipso facto means decrees that you have to be an anarcho-capitalist. Okay.
Yeah.
We're trying to establish principles ahead of time, just to move forward in moving, in discussing it. All right. So, anyway, Soviet Funtime asked a question here. Just real quick, I'm going to answer it, and then we can go back to this thing. How does private security companies work in an Ancap society? The same way they work in an Ancom society.
Well, I just wanted to ask that because from what I can see, it has the potential to backfire and turn into a monopoly. Well, not a natural monopoly. If one company were to say to get an advantage in the market, they could use the force, the superior capital to buy more weapons and eliminate the competition through force.
Okay, but if you're not familiar with people's purchases as far as they're wanting to insure themselves against loss, okay, they have certain things that they do to make sure that bad shit doesn't happen. Okay, whether it be if I buy a car, I go ahead and do some research on it to see that it's gotten good reviews, or whatever.
Well,
okay. Like if I'm going to buy something on eBay, I buy from a reputable seller instead of a person who's just out there. Right?
I know what you're talking about, reputation and that, but
I'm just saying the general concept of avoiding loss that you are averse to. Okay, it's not necessarily about a reputation system. All I'm talking about is that people go through steps to avoid loss that they're really averse to. If you don't like it, and it's really important to you, you don't want to have that happen. You're going to take some steps that are going to make sure that those types of things don't happen. So what would you do as a person if you were going to be interested in having a, I don't know, let's say we are in an Ancom or Ancap country or region, and there are other people who are in a barbarian feudalistic type state, on this island elsewhere. Okay, we've got to make sure that we can defend our property or our community or our children or whatever from this potential aggressor. Okay, we want to avoid having a company that we decide to buy services from becoming an oppressive dictatorship. So what do? Well, you instead establish a communal voluntary militia type thing. Perhaps that's a way that you do it. Okay, you could do that in an Ancom society. You could do that in an Ancap society. Either one could do it. Okay.
I'm just saying there might be a risk with private security companies.
Sure, there is a potential risk, and the thing that's important about it is that you consider that to be a very valuable thing to worry about, and I would agree that is a very valid concern, and we all would agree that it is a valid concern. We don't want to have,
a cartel of
what's the name of Cyberdyne from the Terminator thing. We don't want to have that kind of thing. Skynet. We don't want to have a Skynet, obviously. Nobody wants a Skynet. So we're going to take precautions. And there's going to be precautions that you can take that are a variety of different things that you can do. We don't know exactly which methodology would be used, but obviously it is a concern, and it is a legitimate concern, and people value it enough to make those choices in their investments, right? in their decision.
So you're saying you would have voluntary militias in an Ancap society?
That's one way of dealing with it, I would think. I mean, wouldn't you agree that having I mean, as far as I understand it, if an Ancom society was like that, you'd basically have people in your community who would
everybody agreed
to volunteer to defend the
I mean, I'm not an Ancom, so I'm just asking.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, another minor problem, there's no way of stopping private security corps from forming.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there is. Absolutely.
How would you do that without violating NAP?
How would you do that? By creating a market interest in not having it.
Right.
You know, you can't sell something if nobody's willing to buy it.
Right.
So if you create a society that, what's that?
You would have to have like a major advertising campaign against it.
Not really.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a major advertising campaign. It could certainly just be a philosophical understanding that's communal. You could have it just be.
What do you buy herpes, right? If herpes was on a free market, would you go and buy it?
Obviously not. Right?
No. Right?
Unless I don't know. Unless you're like a scientist who's wanting to to like study it.
So like or cure it. Right?
I mean, with private security corps, it's not like with herpes. There's certain advantages to the private security corps over voluntary militias.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, we've got a company that's a business that's like Walmart. Okay. Now let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that Walmart is not a statist company, which it is. But let's just assume that we have a company that is actually a very large company. Okay. Which really doesn't happen that much in an anarcho-capitalist society.
Too much competition.
There's very, once you get past the what is it called, scale of what is it, economy of scale. Once you get past the economy of scale, which is no more than a factory really. Once you've got a factory, there's no reason for you to be able to have 6 factories. We can go into that, but let's just say that you've got.
I'd like to bring something up.
All right. Let me finish the response on this, and then we'll go to your point. All right, so you've got a company that's, or you have a person who's quite wealthy, all right, and so he's paying for his own private security, all right. Now he's paying for his own private security, and they're doing what? Well, they're protecting his property. Okay, let's say that that's fine. There's no issue there. Now, if he's paying them to go out and be aggressors, okay, he's paying them to go off and screw with other people. Now, this creates, number one, fear in every other person that's around. Okay, it's not just, oh wow, he's going off and screwing over this one guy, and well, that's fine. We'll just go ahead and ignore it, because we've come to an understanding that the government is a bad concept. Okay, we don't accept the initiation of force as a principle. Statists do. People who believe in government, they accept that the initiation of force is legitimate and appropriate for government to do on behalf of them.
Well, I'm assuming not everyone in an anarcho-capitalist society would accept NAP. I mean, there's a wide variety of libertarians out there, and they would be living to live in an anarcho-capitalist society, but not exactly follow NAP. And also, you would have people who wouldn't buy into the ideology.
No. Okay, look, I myself find that the NAP is insufficient, and but it is certainly, it's a nice principle. It sounds good and everything, but there's a lot more to it than that. I believe in the consistency principle, where it accepts that all things being equal, as far as neither one of us is a murderer, then you and I are moral equivalents. I have no right to authority over you. You have no right to authority over me, as the general nature. And so, I mean, it's a little bit more. But yes, I get where you're coming from. That yes, there is no consensus that or maybe there's not consensus. Maybe there is consensus. There might be some people who do accept it and whatever. But as a rule, if you are an Ancap or an Ancom, either one, you do not accept the idea of having a government having a hierarchical permission or authority or legitimization to initiate violence against other people. Is this an acceptable statement?
Yeah, but
okay. Well, then if we accept that as a general statement, all right, when a person starts to, or a company starts to go ahead and do that kind of thing, they're met with resistance, and this resistance is violent. Okay? Now, I'm not sure about the cost effectiveness of hiring people just for the intent purpose of going out and being aggressive when they know that they're going to meet violent resistance.
Well, they don't have to be they don't have to have someone hire them. They could just be aggressive if they find it more profitable just to take land or act as a pseudo-government organization.
Right. So let's say you've got a roving gang, a biker gang. You know, they all get together and they get their guns and they say, all right, well, we're going to go around and pillage and do all that kind of stuff. This type of thing could happen in an Ancom situation. This could happen in an Ancap situation. Either one of them could have it happen.
Oh, I just want to inform you now that I'm not an Ancom.
Well, okay. Yeah, okay. In any environment, whether it be a country, a government, you know, a communist, capitalist, you know, anarcho, whatever, it doesn't matter. Every single one of these things could have that biker gang get together and decide, we're just going to go ahead and pillage our neighbors. Okay? They are all going to respond to it in some fashion or another. Now, the anarcho-capitalist position is one that enables people to use the market to find out which one of these solutions would be the most cost-effective in order to solve the problem. So, therefore, we feel that it is a superior method of dealing with these types of problems that could exist in any situation.
Yeah, I think I should have rephrased the question because I think I was alluding to that that if there were a private security corp that had gotten an advantage, like for example, eventually there would be one private security corp that would be richer than the rest, right? Because that's how markets work. I'm not saying it would be a complete monopoly, right?
Okay. Well, the idea that yes, there would be a business that comes to have economic advantage over another one because they do things more efficiently or because they have achieved a level of respect within the community that people are buying their services in more numbers than others, yes, that's fine. One of the things that happens within an anarcho-capitalist society or anarcho-capitalist business structure is that dominance in a particular industry is fleeting. It happens to be very fleeting. If you look at industries where there have been almost no regulation by governments, but instead regulation through business, interbusiness, interaction, insurance companies, and other types of things that people use to make sure that they don't get a bad product, you will see that in those businesses where, I'll say, for example, like back in the day when they had the businesses that were making cars. Okay, before the government got involved and started regulating and interfering and all that, Ford was just one of just tons and tons and tons of different automobile manufacturers who were getting into the industry. And then once government started getting involved and started making requirements on, a variety of different activities.
I understand that governments feed into monopolies and create monopolies.
Right.
I'm thinking
it also changes the paradigm of dominance in a market. It's fairly rare. It happens from time to time, but it's fairly rare that a relatively free market has a business leader who is so superior to everyone else that they stay in power for an extended period of time.
I'm not saying they would for the private security. I'm saying they could have advantage in terms of capital. Wait, what?
Advantage.
They would have an advantage, and they would be able to use that advantage to buy superior weapons, and gain more popularity, and eventually use force to take out their rivals, and eventually create a monopoly through force.
Right, yeah.
And they would pretty much be free to create a pseudo-government organization like gangs do.
Yeah. I understand the concern. The thing that I would say is that in order for them to do so, the amount of time that they would have to be in dominance, where they would have financial security and excess profits that they could devote towards such a venture, would have to be an extremely long period of time.
I mean, I guess they could eliminate their rivals one by one. Like if they gain a slight advantage over a lower rival, they could team up with another corp to eliminate the smaller rivals and eventually turn on the other corps.
Yeah. If you look into the in how the prices work on things that become more and more scarce, they become more and more expensive if they're desired of the same amount. If there is the same amount of demand for the same product, but they become more scarce, the price rises, right? And the same thing happens in the case of other businesses that that you have. If you've got other businesses that you're trying to acquire in order to, you're going to buy them out and you're going to remove some competition, then the value of all the other competitors that are out there, they can increase the price that they demand from you in order to be purchased. Okay, because there's only a very small supply and a high demand. The same demand is stable. Okay, now in the case of the business becoming extraordinarily successful for an extended, long, protracted period of time, yes, they could. But then the question is then, is the wealth of the society, which is a discretionary wealth that occurs in other people's lives, similarly going to have the same growth? And yes, it will, or greater growth. Okay, so if you then have all these, let's say this company has been the leading, industry leader for 80 years. They've accumulated a huge amount of wealth in their war chest. They're now able to go ahead and say, all right, we're going to buy nuclear bombs. We're going to buy, all sorts of nasty stuff that we can just go ahead and impose our will on everybody. He's got a long-term master plan. The guy was 12 years old when he came up with it. He's now 92, and he's going to take over the world. Meanwhile, every single other person that's been out there has had an exceptionally, high standard of wealth creation, and they have all this disposable wealth available to them as well. So when this guy tries to go ahead and do this stuff, and he jumps on me, you gotta, dude, stop it. Did you get out? Yeah. All right. Why did you do that? All right. Look, we're running out of time. I wanted to get back to the question that we had that Red and Black wanted to ask.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's all right. Thank you for the questions, though.
You're welcome.
Okay, so basically, my friend Axel, he can't really talk because he didn't have a mic, but he wanted me to ask, what is the ethical justification for you exclusively and necessarily being allowed to own all of the fruits of your labor?
What is the ethical justification?
Yeah.
Well, that's actually a fairly long topic. I don't think we have the time for it, but I'll go through it as quickly as I possibly can if we can agree not to interrupt me. Okay. The person who is when you have people, you've got multiple different people, we assume that they're equals, all other things being equal. That there is no innate being, person who is individually of superior value or authority over another person. We do not accept slavery. Okay. Then the second, people will disagree. This is an innate fact that you cannot have agreement on everything at all times, because there is a limited amount of things that can be done with the same matter at the same period of time in the universe. Okay, two decisions cannot both go through and have one thing happen with some item, some piece of matter at the same time. So then we have to determine which one gains precedence, which one gains authority over having the decision be made. Now, the person who created said product is deemed to have superior claim over how the action of this particular matter will be used, because without them, it wouldn't exist. Without their actions, the fruit of their labor wouldn't, is not capable of existing. All right. This does not deny other people from taking their labors and producing the exact same thing, a duplicate using different atoms. Okay. Now, the question is then, how do they gain authority to use it for forever? Well, there's a disagreement on that. Some people believe that there is a abandonment that occurs if you cease to continue to use whatever the item is for a significant period of time, and nature reclaims it, then it ceases to be yours. Things of that nature. I guess the claim is that without your direct specific individual action, the item does not exist without that. Is the reason why you have a claim over the final decision-making authority. We can hear your typing really loud.
Sorry.
All right. So I guess that's the best answer that I can give. In this, I mean, there's a lot more detail that has to go into such a question, but it's as concise as I could possibly. I guess other people might use the response that it is a extrinsic part of who I am as a being, and so let's say if I use the apple to create a if I use the apple to create a kidney, then I've used myself. It is of me. And is there something specifically that makes the biochemical process superior in its claim of ownership? Because it's obvious that I own my kidney. All right, well, what about things that are not attached to you? Well, if I take my head and shave it, and I take the hair that was there and I knit it into a wig so that I can take my hair off and wear it when I want it or don't want it, and then at this point, is it's no longer mine because I set it down and leave it alone for an extended period of time. To me, it's fairly clear that your biochemical processes produced the hair. Without you, it wouldn't exist. Therefore, it's your hair, regardless of whether it's attached to your body. So we've determined that having it being physically connected to you is not a necessary component to ownership. All right. Even if I removed my kidney from my body, set it in a jar, let it sit there for 5 weeks, and then come back and say I want to take that kidney and put it back in my body, everyone has clearly understood that that is still your kidney, even though it's not in your body. So physical connection, being inside of your body, being part of your body, isn't necessarily a component. We can go into crazy examples like robots and whether they they create their own appendages and things of that nature, but we don't sentient robots, and we don't have to do that. But if you wanted to extrapolate that, you certainly could do so. But bottom line is that it was the fruits of your actions that created it, and that gives you ultimate final authority over the decision-making process. So in any case, I do want to thank everyone who has joined us, especially my friend Kyron. Thanks for joining. I'm sorry I had to cut you off so many times, but I wanted to make sure that...
It's because I'm black. Fuck you. Structural racism.
No, it's because I do want to make sure that my guests feel that they're able to be we're coming from the same argument side, and I want to make sure that anybody who joins here who wants to disagree is certainly feels that they get a chance to say all of what it is that they want to do. So, in any case, thank you all for joining, Axel and Red and Black and Sam. Definitely, Sam. Thank you for being the first to join in and keep us from having to just bullshit here with ourselves.
Because we do that well.
Yeah, but we can certainly do that. And thank you for joining us if you are watching, and I hope you'll watch us next week here at the Anarchist Experience. This will be next Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Peace out.